think that the people are asking.
She posted all the hours she had on the Keith project.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's a girl.
Yeah.
That was such a success that.
Yes,
See you here, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the help you did on all of that.
Yeah, no problem.
I did get some stuff out.
Good.
Yeah, you do.
Good.
That's been an ongoing. We did some ordinances.
Well, we have to change the, Joe said she was gonna do this, so she took 2 matters the first time. Trying to know if my back was back.
Thank you.
And then she bring it back time and then.
We won't tell OSHA.
No. And then we have to, yeah.
Get your family matters also.
Thanks.
You going to TK or not?
Well, no,
Are you going on a road trip or not?
I'm hoping to still.
I try to do all that.
Oh, I'm sure all
I
was.
texted him today, I said, because they called and said that she died. But then I said,
Yeah, we have
give me some dates.
quite a bit.
And,
And we have her set up so that in case they call, we can let her know softly that if she can.
Sorry.
That's okay. Her laptop is set up with the Teams, so we can let her know if she calls in. I don't know if she will or not.
Okay.
Okay. Did you get an agenda, Mike? Mhm.
Sucks the money.
Go ahead and print this out.
We haven't lost her. She's just in Anaheim for graduation today. I know. I tried to stop her. Her brothers.
I guess, oh, let him grow the mosquitoes. I remember we ended up with killer mosquitoes like we did killer bees.
I told her already. Make sure he doesn't become a lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got that.
Like needles that long, right?
Trisha, did you have any handouts that you wanted me to pass out or?
I brought the slides.
Okay, that's
I
fine.
didn't know you were putting all this in the packet, so.
Oh, good. Oh, great. And it's ready whenever you're ready.
There's 2 sides of the argument, there's bad on both sides. Yeah.
Did Sonia Brown get a hold of you?
I called Tony
CFA
in Ukraine.
I don't know, I gave you the name, she wanted to know, so you can follow up on what stuff going on in the farm.
I know Senator Hurtado has a whole
We were
group down
doing
here
engagement
Friday that I'm meeting
research, they
with.
were working on
I
bio
talked to Sonia
work.
recently.
And,
What is the state of the country?
but it was being done, but Fauci had it. And so
You can do that. You can take off your tie too.
No, leave the tie on.
in this case,
The jacket may not be necessary. Tie it.
We're gonna use that wall, so yeah.
That's why we're.
Sure, it's kind of an patient got the requirements.
Right.
And then he's working and stuff like that, and I'm always like, you know, I'm young, we have to, oh, I need a suit and tie, get into it. Well, you should have dressed for me.
Apparently one of the ceiling doesn't work, so we had to bring in another one.
Well, I think technology has been really good.
My grandson is in Bible college now, and he's getting out. And I took him into my closet.
It's like 2 different schools in our office
here,
right
and
now.
I have no use for it.
Well, that's good. It doesn't feel cool to me, but.
No, I mean,
They're
they're working on it, it's getting there. They're working.
It's been long enough, they're back in style.
Yeah, I need to say one for funerals. Yeah. One for weddings. All right.
We're funerals and soundboard.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Tulare County Agriculture Advisory Committee meeting. If you're here for some other meeting, you still got time to get the door. We're going to start with our introductions. And I'm gonna start with our Hood County Council, my immediate left here.
Hi, everyone. If you don't know me, I'm Aaron Zaheen from County Council. I'm filling in for McKinsey today.
Justin Linedecker, non-permanent crop farming.
Dennis Townsend, Tulare County Board of Supervisors.
Bob Bender, Being Ranchers, but representing the BIA, non-voting.
Larry McCarty, Board Supervisor.
Tom Tucker, Ag Commissioner.
Tricia Stever Butler, representing Tulare County Farm Bureau.
Vincent Salinas representing Large Cities.
Derek Williams, Allied Ag.
Scott Spear, Conservation Natural Resources.
Keith Yonke, Tulare County Environmental Health.
Doreen Alves, RMA staff.
Alva Parker, administrative staff.
Mike Washington, Tulare County RMA.
Jim Sullins, your chair and representing General Agriculture. Welcome back. This is time for introductions.
Watch your step, please.
Joe Sanderson, I'm a camp rancher in Tulare.
Very good. Good to see you back. All right. I'll open the floor for public comments. If you have something, an item to discuss that is not on the agenda, knowing that as it's not on the agenda, we can't take any action. But if you'd like to bring it up, and I open the floor up at this time, both public, yes, and also coordinators. Any public comments? Mr. Bender.
Well, I haven't been in this group very long, but I noticed you have vacancies on general farming and permanent crop farming. It's been that way for a while. Would you like me to find you a couple more people?
You bet. I think some of us have gotten tired of asking. If you can find somebody, please ask. And the supervisors so note also.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else?
You know what, Mr. Chair, this might be the best time for me to do it. Earlier today, we received a request for remote participation pursuant to AB 2449 in this meeting by a member of this board. I had to say no to the request, and I just want to explain that reason to the board. Under the Brown Act, under the current effective rules of the Brown Act, we cannot allow for just cause or emergency remote meetings or appearances by one board member if we haven't agendized the meeting to include Zoom or Teams or some other form of two-way audiovisual remote attendance. Because our agenda didn't include Zoom, we're fine, we have a quorum anyway, but I had to tell that member, no, you can't participate and be part of this meeting. Just to bring everyone up to speed. Absolutely the choice is yours, whether or not to have the meeting in person or partial remote or just cut Zoom out altogether. Just want to make sure that this entire board understands that the option to cut out Zoom means that if someone has a family emergency or is sick, they can't remote attend. So you're just going to have to go on with a quorum of less than all of your members.
Thank you.
Is there the capability to have that here, Zoom?
I won't speak for staff. I don't know what the Wi-Fi capabilities are in the room, but maybe, and I'll let staff answer that portion.
Not pro or con, I'm just curious if we have the technology.
I've read I got an email notice on it, and McKinsey sent it to me. Best as I understand, if we do that, we also have to notice it in the meeting, and we have to make that Zoom location available to the public for whoever's Zooming in, or we have to have a public node.
Well, and so under normal Brown Act rules, under traditional Brown Act rules, yes, you'd have to digitally notice the teleconference location of the person teleconferencing in. There's a trial period for the Brown Act right now running from 2023 to 2025 in which there's the ability for just cause appearances or emergency appearances. Well, let's say there was another pandemic or another flood, which is something we may be seeing here in the next month or so. It may be impracticable for one of the members of this board to be able to reach this location in person, so they request a just cause appearance remotely. That can be done if you also allowed the public the same opportunity to participate in the meeting, which is what the Brown Act is all about. So just making sure that the public can do the same thing that your board member is trying to do. allows for that remote just cause participation. And that's AB 2449. You don't need to note the location of someone appearing under the just cause rules. They do have to tell you whether or not there's another adult in the room, who they are and why they're there, and you have to have two-way audiovisual capabilities. Why the legislature built this all in, I don't know, but those are just the rules I know.
Question? Yeah, so in the other meetings I'm going to, for example, the Air District, they immediately cut out the Zoom when the declared emergency ended. So when you say that we could vote to do that, we'd have to basically declare a just cause, I guess, emergency reason to do it?
No, you can't have the whole meeting remotely.
Exactly.
You can't have the whole meeting remotely. Right. One member who has a special circumstance can request to attend a meeting remotely under the just cause provisions.
And who approves that?
The entire board, by a vote.
So prior to the meeting.
And it'd have to be in advance enough to notice it.
It says at least 6 days unless there's a flexible schedule and you do it ahead of time, although.
In the case today, we received a request today, which is obviously too short of notice to be able to notice a Zoom or Teams meeting on the agenda. But if they did it, 5 days in advance, maybe. But again, that's something that's at the discretion of the chair and staff who control the agenda.
I don't think we need to worry about it too much.
Yeah. Just for your information only. Sorry to take up so much time.
Thanks, sir.
Elma, did you get we didn't do a roll call, but we did introductions. Ron Perigin just entered the room. Do we have enough? You've got everybody substantiated for the quorum, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Ron? Stay over here.
I'm okay.
Must be the supervisor.
I'm sure you'll say something if you want to. Yeah, Mr. Townsend's a little nervous right there.
Vice Chair.
All right. Next item of business is to approve the March 15th recorded meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair, it doesn't require it to be approved, but they are recorded and we're letting you know where it is located.
Okay, all right. Thank you. One of these days I'll catch up with technology. So that is just an item of reference. If you want to go back and see what you said, that's where you find it.
So from now on, Mr. Chair, we need to make sure that we look at it ahead of time, and if we have anything issues on it, we'd be very prepared to bring it up, because it's not going to be something we're going to look at.
What would be the issue? Because a live recording is a real thing.
Everywhere else we go, we always get handed a copy of the minutes, we review it. So this, we're going to be doing it on our own, and then
yes,
we have an issue to bring it up. Which could be a problem.
So you're going to want to change what you said on the video.
Yeah.
I got to stand by that.
All right. Item number 4, poultry ordinance amendment. Discussion and possible action. Mr. Townsend, would you like to open that, or do you have staff that's going to help you with it?
I'll go ahead and open. I don't really have anything to do. Just
not prepared to.
Okay. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for letting me take a few minutes to get some input on this, and thank you all for serving based on the conversation you were having opening the meeting, that it's hard to keep people on the group, and I think that's true of pretty much all advisory committees. But so really thank you for your service here. Yeah, what's happening, and it's a cyclical thing, is we get calls. Of course, most of our calls are on road conditions, and that right now is on steroids because of all of the flooding. So now we're really getting road calls, but in cycles, I receive quite a few calls about roosters and the suspicion of fighting roosters. People raising roosters just for fighting. I'm an architect by trade. I've been out in our communities for 30 years, and I've seen a lot of these. And I think it's a very believable suspicion that they are being raised for cockfighting. And so a few months back, but really before all the flooding started, so really at the end of last year was where we're getting a lot of complaints from people. And what happens is we've got our ordinance that says, you can have 100 birds maximum. But it does say it's for the raising or slaughter of without a use permit. raising and slaughter of, sorry, I think in the ordinance, it said or. I think it says or, let's see. So in the ordinance that's included there on page 2, it'd be on the AE exclusive agricultural zone under use B item 4, it says the raising and slaughter of poultry, rabbits and other, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes down to what's a use permit is required for under D3, it says raising or slaughter. So that seems to indicate that we need a use permit if we're just raising. Now, I don't know if that's a typo, but it might solve a problem that we're having, because what I'm getting complaints about is that people are raising only roosters. When you go out and look, it looks like the variety that are mostly used for cockfighting. But whenever we respond to that, we would send animal services out there. They'll look and say, well, they all look healthy, and there's, and we'd send RMA out, and RMA would say, well, there's less than 100, because 100 is that maximum. And they all look healthy and happy. So what can we do? Did you see cockfighting happening? No. We'll get noise complaints, that sort of thing. Talking to the sheriff, of course, anytime they have the opportunity, they'll bust the cockfighting rings that are out there. We've just had one, I think, a couple of weeks ago that came up that they took care of. So some of the people that are complaining about it have asked, is there anything we can do in the ordinance? And the only suggestion that I've heard that I think could have some merit would be to do a percentage of roosters to hens if you're raising. But I don't know what that percentage would be. I don't know if it takes, one rooster covers 10 hens. I don't know how that works. So I kind of wanted to get an input. Should we go down a path of trying to fix this, trying to come up with a way that would give us, if it's a pretty darn obvious they're raising roosters for cockfighting, even though they're under 100, is there a way to control that? The other thing that's come up is somebody said, well, they'll say that they're showbirds. So I looked up, is there such a thing as show roosters? There is such a thing as show roosters. Have no clue what kind of industry that is, how much money people make from it, whether that's actually what they're raising. Why do always roosters look exactly alike? If they're raising show roosters, you would think there'd be multiple varieties, but they all tend to kind of look like the ones you use for cockfighting. So I'm looking for input. Does our ordinance already address it, or can we update it to address it?
Well, a lot of these roosters that you're talking about in Tulare County, there has popped up an industry. These guys are raising the roosters, and they're coming in here from the Philippines and South America, and they're buying these roosters because they're better roosters than they've got in the Philippines and South America as far as fighting chickens go. Now, when you draw the distinction between a fighting chicken and a regular rooster, when you start seeing the combs cut off and the legs where they've, worked it to put the knives on them, that's very definitely a fighting chicken. But there is an industry, and I know several people that are doing this. They're raising the roosters. They come in here from the Philippines, and it's $100 cash for every one of them. They take them and they fly them to the Philippines. So I mean, it's like I say, you can control the number if 100 is the magic number, or 50 or whatever. But when you look at these chickens, it's obvious if they're raising them for fighting. Like I say, they're going to have the combs cut, they're going to have the legs picked, and but there are a lot of them going out of the country.
So the ones that are flown out of the country,
If you can please place
do they
yourself
look
on
like
mute.
the fighting ones that are ready to fight here, or they just look like
They
normal
look like a regular rooster.
Okay.
A fighting rooster, they'll cut his comb off, and they do some work on the leg.
So when they get to the Philippines, that's when
They do all that on the Philippines. See, that's how these guys try to stay out of trouble. But apparently you can buy certain lines of these roosters. You buy the eggs, and you hatch the roosters and you raise them and, you know, they come and buy them and they pay cash.
The eggs are sexed?
Huh?
The eggs are already sexed?
Yeah, I'm not sure how they're doing it, but they're maintaining these fighting chicken lines, just like you'd maintain a line of cattle or anything else.
Fighting bulls or?
Yeah, you know, and this is what they want in these foreign countries because their lines of fighting chickens have been depleted, inbred or whatever.
I have a question for staff. What are the requirements for a use permit? Let's say they can't fit under one of these caveats.
Have to go to the planning commission.
And the permit process through the planning, I mean, it's
So an extensive, I mean,
It's
it's a
extensive,
review and it's a discretionary, it's not an automatic, so.
But there's not given.
Public hearing and.
There's not given setback lines or?
Not necessarily.
That could be one of the conditions that somebody might, conditional use permit is you can do this, you can raise, more than 100, let's say somebody wants more than 100 birds, they can say, I want 200 birds, and I want a use permit, so they could, staff could say, okay, here's the condition of you having that many birds, they gotta be this far away from property lines, or they gotta have this water and this feed, and blah, 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 this shade.
So, I don't know if it's still the same, but it has been for many, many years. It also depends on the zone, because I know that when I was a Pixie lieutenant, we had a couple of of them. It depended on what side of the street they were on, whether or not they could even have a rooster. Some could have a rooster, across the street could have 2 roosters. The other one across on the corner was unlimited because of the way the zones were set up. We ran into that a lot, and we have a lot of unincorporated communities that are full of roosters.
Right.
And so not only are we gonna talk just AE exclusive, if we're looking at an entire ordinance, we're gonna have to look at all of them, because there were different standards on different zones, and literally, I gave them the address when I called that one time, like, what side of the street's on, they were looking at the map myself, oh, they can have X. So we ran into that several times.
So the ordinance is, based on square footage of the property in AE, and that follows suit on a lot of them. So many birds, I think it's 3 per 1,300 square feet or something like that. So it depends on the size of the parcel. So parcels can vary dramatically that are right next to each other, across the street from each other. So that's one variable on there. As far as residential zoning, it doesn't allow chickens at all, period. Even, there's no option even to get a use permit. Then the other area, and I don't know if it was included in here, is rural residential. So the RA zone. I believe that allows, again, based on the square footage of the property. But they're all the same amount per square foot, but again, the lots all change, they vary in size.
And the limit is always 100.
And then, yeah, and the 100 or more require a use permit. Now, I know one of...
No, 100 birds total before it triggers, regardless of the size of the parcel, 100 birds total trigger the special use permit.
I just thought I heard you say per person.
No. Per parcel.
I was like, okay.
That'd be a whole other thing.
Now we're back to marijuana plants. Yeah.
Mike, on that, in the ordinance I mentioned earlier, as I was reading through it, it just kind of caught my eye that the AE exclusive, without a use permit, it's the raising and the slaughter. So that would imply that.
It says or slaughter.
Well, depends on which
Copy
page you're
I
looking
have.
at.
So under use B, purpose A and then use B, item 4.
Okay.
It says the raising and slaughter of poultry.
Okay,
that's without a use permit. Then when you go to use permits under D on the next page, item 3, it says raising or slaughter.
Right.
So I don't know if the authors of that way back in the day, if that was their way of saying, if you're raising, that you have to be raising the poultry for slaughter, or else you have to have a use permit. So if you're doing it for show, or you're doing it export to foreign countries to have chicken fighting, if you're doing it for anything else other than the raising and slaughter, maybe it requires the use permit. I don't know if that was intended.
No, I think if you look at this, when you have more than 3 birds, for that. That requires the use permit, under the use permit side of it.
Yeah, and that one has or slaughter.
It has or slaughter.
So without a use permit, it says raising and slaughter.
You know, and it leaves out what most people are doing with the poultry flocks today is, are layers.
With the what, I'm sorry?
Are layers, they're selling eggs.
Oh,
Even less than 100 chickens, there's a lot of backyard acres out there that are having small flocks.
Yeah. So anyway,
I think that is semantics, that is just parsing it very thin. I don't believe and or is often used in things like this, and or slaughter of, so and or are oftentimes, again, we're dealing with an antiquated ordinance, but so I would see it that way.
Trish?
So a while back, I submitted the Solano County rooster ordinance. So I was scrolling through it again. I sent it to Doreen if we want to look at it, on a screen together. But it addresses much of what the supervisor is speaking to. I mean, it has in it a section on the keeping of roosters and the prohibition of tethering, which would largely correct all possible cockfighting considerations, because we're almost always hanging out on a little chain under a little Snoopy dog house.
That's right.
So we might want to look at taking apart the Solano ordinance, which their Farm Bureau supported and was aware of, and determining what pieces of it we borrow and draft for consideration in this county.
One of the things that you'd asked too about what the numbers of roosters are needed for raising. When we reached out to the cooperative extension, it basically their answer that they provided was a ratio of about 7 to 10 hens per rooster.
Okay.
For a growing
rooster per 7 to 10 hens.
Yeah.
Aaron, you had a comment?
Just to piggyback off of Tricia earlier, I found the Ventura County rooster ordinance, which is what I put in front of Supervisor Johnson right there, sorry. And it's very similar to what you were talking about, so it's probably based off the Solano County one. But it's great, it limits normal rooster keeping to 5.
That's what this one does.
25 for 4-H and FFA, and then it doesn't set a limit for egg or meat producers.
Yeah, it looks like this one does the same. It exempts commercial production and it exempts 4-H and FFA, and then prohibits more than 5.
Yeah.
So, quick question on those. Do they allow for a special use permit to be approved, on a planning commission decision basis to address some of those I know there was talk the last time we were here about a show rooster operation that didn't necessarily fall into 4-H.
I guess we'd have to look at it closer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see in this ordinance is only 3 pages long, and I don't see anything about use permits.
I think the one Aaron had something about describing what a legitimate showbird would be, or what did it call it? Poultry?
Yeah, legitimate poultry hobbyist.
Poultry hobbyist.
Yeah,
So the ones you would see at the fair, maybe?
Yeah, something like that probably. That's what I thought.
Almost everything at the fair is a children's project, which is also exempted. 4-H and FFA.
But there are adult poultry shows.
Correct.
Right.
Houston and different places too.
Yeah, it's defined as a person who owns and breeds poultry for exhibition or for sale of offspring in accordance with accepted poultry raising practices.
So,
which according to that definition, might line up with people selling roosters in the Philippines.
Right.
Well,
but
the operations I know of, they fly the chicks in here from Mississippi, they're breeding them in Mississippi, they fly the chicks in here, and then they raise the roosters from that.
Are they raised by contract or they buy them?
No, they don't have a contract, they just got a contact in Mississippi that grows the chicks. And they ship the chicks in here, and then they raise the roosters, and then the guys come in and buy them.
Go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, so just to complicate it a little more. So something that I recently learned, is because of my age and my weight and so forth, is I did not know that they had come up with a treatment for your knees that is actually made from rooster combs. I don't know how people are aware of that, but, and I don't know if that's, any of that is being developed here, if anybody that are raising roosters just for that purpose, or, you know, how the laws of that or anything else, but how does all this gonna be affected by that kind of an industry as it's proving more, my knee surgeon said it's actually been very successful, kind of expensive, but really it can actually give you, add years to your knees without having to have knee surgery.
And you strut a little bit more after you have it.
Yes, I don't know, I haven't had it yet, so if you see me walking in like this, you know, then you'll know it really works.
I would just offer, and the supervisor, who spent most of his career in law enforcement can probably corroborate this. I know when Cassie has communicated with me about some of the cockfights that they go in and seize birds from, you know, cleaning this up has other benefits. There's almost always other contraband found at these cockfighting rings. There's often illegal drugs and illegal firearms and, you know, all kinds of other bad stuff that comes out of these places. So I think strengthening an ordinance to benefit removing some of that activity from our community is valuable, because it also potentially addresses some of the other illegal stuff that goes on here.
Yeah, and I agree. You know, he's been on the committee for a while, and we've gone in many cases from a lot less rural county than we once were. You know, we've got a lot more suburban ranches and such as that out there. My question would be, if we write something like this, who enforces it? You know, any regulation, any ordinance is only as good as the enforcement. So is this a code compliance deal, or is this a sheriff deal, or is this animal control?
Solano's is animal control and ag commissioner.
I agree.
We like that. All
Solano is
right.
a perfect fit.
We have a motion.
I wish I could vote.
A lot of people don't realize that, but Tom has a badge.
Yeah.
Do you need action on this, Mike?
Well, I think we're having a good, healthy discussion. The only thing the thing I would say, again, enforcement is a challenge. It'll just be like when they go out, it'll be, well, these are my kids' thing, just like all parties are a relative.
I'm a
you know?
hobbyist.
Right. So, I mean, it's easy to say this will solve all these problems, and the sheriff is aggressively going after cockfighting rings and all of that. It's all about how much effort, time, which equates to money and staffing, to enforce any ordinances. But so long as it's on Tom and animal control, I'm all for it.
Yeah, and it isn't, it's already that, as you were saying, Chairman, that it already is that way, where you're not sure who is going to respond. If somebody calls and says, wow, there's all these roosters next door, they're really close to the property line, and they're keeping me up all night, because there's 90 of them out here and they're crowing all night. So probably, you know, maybe a code enforcement guy would go by just to check it out and see if it was, you know, because of the noise. If somebody said, oh, there's these chickens out here, well, they look sick, you know, or I'm pretty sure they're, you know, they're not treating them well because they're probably just raising it for fighting, and then they would maybe animal services would go out. And if we had too many, and it was obvious there were 200 chickens on a half an acre, then it might be RMA that goes out.
And if it's 7 nights without sleep, it may be the sheriff on the psychology.
And if something's going on, yeah. Yeah, and obviously the sheriff goes out on anything. You know, they get leads, they're doing stuff in the background, they're looking for these, but they're not gonna go out just because somebody says there's 80 roosters or 90 roosters or 110 roosters next door to me. They might drive by, but if there's not some suspicious activity, they're not gonna say, you're not meeting the rooster ordinance. Now, if we did put in there something that did limit the number, say 1 rooster per 7 to 10 is what we said. So if we said 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, that's what you legitimately need for this poultry operation, well, then you're not going to have 100 roosters on one piece of property. That would solve it immediately with enforcement.
Scott's been waiting here, Ron.
Is the intention to control the source for fighting?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the thing, is that the enforcement for the fighting, you've got to catch somebody fighting, right? Before they can bust them, they gotta catch them. If you take away, you know, the method, the way that they get there, then that's another way to attack it. And a lot of these people that call say, I know there's other stuff going on, but they can't prove it. You're not gonna have the deputy drive out and see it happening right there. You know, people coming in at all hours of the night, stuff going on. They're hearing the chickens inside the shed, but if they take all the stuff away, all the paraphernalia, and they're really careful about it, you gotta have some just cause to go in looking for it.
Ron?
Well, isn't this, you know, when you start talking about how many you can have, isn't that code enforcement, basically? I mean, isn't that the responsibility of code enforcement? And I think Larry will tell you that when you start talking about these chicken fights, it's not just around here in California, they're coming in from out of state. And it's big money. And that's where the sheriff's office comes into it.
But that's at the fight, when there's a fight going on.
When you get the chicken, well, you know, it's not just the local folks here that go into the chicken fight.
Right.
These guys come in from out of state, there's big money. And these guys come in from out of state and they have, you know, these chicken fights wherever they can have them. And, when I was a kid, there used to be a barn over there by Rosa, where we ran our cattle, that every Sunday, you get up on the hill and you look down behind the orange groves and there's 150 cars out there every Sunday. I mean, that's been 40 years ago.
It wasn't a church meeting?
But I mean, that's law enforcement when they have the fights, but you know, with code enforcement, you can enforce this number deal however you want to.
And I think there'd always be an overlap, because if somebody were to go out and see something and then see the other activity,
oh yeah,
you know, happen onto it, then of course they would have to call it law.
Yeah, you call the sheriff's office if you know the fight's going on, you see a fight.
So, Mr. Townsend, and Mr. McCarty, I suppose I could assume it's the supervisor's preference that the advisory committee take a look at revising our ordinance? So,
I wouldn't say the whole board, no, because we're not allowed to talk about it with more than two of us anytime, so. I would like to see it looked into to see if there's something, but that's why this was the first stop, because you all are the experts, and to know, you know, are we barking up completely the wrong tree on trying to limit the number of roosters? You know, is that something we should do, shouldn't do? I've heard mixed messages when I've asked about it before. This in this room seems to be pretty positive that maybe we do have something we need to address. And so if we did, it would go back to RMA. We would then request RMA to bring something forward for the whole board to look at.
Well, it's gone on a long time, many years. I think we should have a meeting, probably bring in the sheriff's department, RMA, maybe animal control. Because look, when they raise the chicken, they take the chickens, they call animal control. It's all tied in together. So, the roosters, I mean. So, maybe we should do a meeting.
At the board level, or?
Well, no, just have an ad hoc. We'll have a meeting with you know, Dennis and I and RMA and the sheriff and animal control to see at the county level what it looks like, what we can put together. Tom, you know, since he's going to be the force.
He thought he got out of that.
Yeah, I know, he was sitting there.
He was sitting there real quiet still.
He was trying to sneak, but just bring the players in the room and let's see what it looks like. Bring the ordinances that law ordinances.
You know, just one other thing out there that hasn't been discussed, and you might even want to get somebody there to represent the veterinary science side, because these chicken operations are a real risk for influenza, avian influenza, and that's a real risk to all of our commercial production.
That's why there's the how far down is the line going now? It's moving up, I know.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you, but it is moving.
The line's moving up, they're bringing chickens across. These animal activist groups that are going down there, raiding, running around, wearing the same tennis shoes and the same blue jeans, and they're turning around, they're doing an overwhelming run of Foster Farms, and they're having to kill 40,000 chickens because of the potential for that. So they're spreading a lot of stuff. But I mean, I think we should sit at the county level, let's take a look at it, we can bring it back here, and then we can move forward. Dennis, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I always like to have something you can throw darts at before we have that meeting, so it would be nice to have RMA kind of look at these other ordinances and see if there's something we can fashion as a draft.
Yeah.
And say, how would this affect, the sheriff, how would it affect code enforcement?
Right,
if we went with
and
this?
Tom's aware of the moratorium law, we have somebody, Chris, you wanna be part of that?
Sure.
Sure, why not, in your free time.
Sounds like fun.
I mean, you don't have to, I mean,
Yeah.
we
No,
just,
no, I
we need
think
to
it's
kick it
good.
around and see what it looks like.
Yeah. You know, when we did the ordinance research, when a few of us, reached out to Carmjot and I reached out to Julie Finzel, who's our rangeland advisor and works with livestock producers, there was feedback. In fact, I had asked all the way to a level at Davis of a poultry professor in the UC system for comments for an ordinance. And then in chatting with other farm bureaus, got back the Solano model. So, I mean, we definitely, I think, should bring some poultry producer expertise to the conversation. I too always worry about who's gonna actually enforce something. It's great to, put together a big fancy ordinance, but we know that a lot of folks operate in the shadows of never knowing there's a permit requirement and always waiting for, forgiveness later than pre-approval. So whatever we do, I just would like for it to be something that we really think we can make a difference in helping animal control and helping law enforcement tackle the problem. Cassie has shared here before as well that those critters usually just have to be euthanized when they go in and see those birds, especially if they really have been used in an active fighting ring. They're normally pumped full of nasty drugs, and they're not going to go be pet chickens somewhere after animal control seizes them. They're just probably going to be killed. So it does create a financial burden on the county to go seize all the fighting ring birds, but I absolutely think we should get rid of it. They normally also have dog fights and, like I said, all the other illegal crap going on at the same time when these things get busted. So I'm in favor of seeing the advisory committees support the supervisors in trying to strengthen the ordinance.
With the ordinance, in the other counties, what level of penalty, like say not busting, a cockfight, but an illegal farming or raising of fowl, is it infraction? Is it going to be a misdemeanor? Or like, what would be the level of, I guess, penalty or?
I can read to you from the
Yeah,
Ventura
just
County
curious.
ordinance right now, which seems to be modeled after the Solano County one. A law enforcement officer or public officer can issue a citation on a first offense, and thereafter, anyone that violates this chapter is guilty of a misdemeanor or infraction. And it scales up according to their own civil penalty.
No authority for confiscation or anything like that.
So if they were guilty of, if they were actually found guilty of a misdemeanor, then it could happen. Yeah, then it could happen.
But, okay, so they show up on scene, they get a complaint, they show up on scene, the guy's got, whatever he's got violates that order, he's got 100 birds. So, we're gonna photograph and leave them on scene to continue the violation, or the expectation to take them, because now that's gonna be a big issue.
Yeah, and that's a good point that I think with your unique perspective on that, you'd be the better person to give advice on.
So I think the point is,
Just talking about confiscation at all.
It does not.
the point is, we could, how far can we take it in an ordinance, I mean.
Usually the ordinances you give there's a warning, they have a chance to clean it up. If not, you come back, I think a second notice almost always.
Usually, like the standard practice that we've been prescribed from council is usually giving a warning, we call it like a courtesy notice saying you may be in violation or you think you're in violation of this ordinance. Please take steps to mitigate, and then we go back out in a couple weeks, we check it again, and then when they're still in violation, then we send a 30-day warning saying, or a 30-day notice to correct. And then after 30 more days then we find them and say, you're in violation, order to correct, or whatever, and the fees or penalties apply. But again, we wouldn't be confiscating on that procedure. And honestly, as a misdemeanor, I don't know whether that goes through the DA then, right, if it was a criminal. And, you know, that's not in our hands, that's the sheriff. And then the DA ultimately, whether they'll prosecute or not, you know, so.
All right, so I don't think we need a motion at this time. As I understand it, the supervisors are going to they're going to organize a ad hoc group.
Well, I have one, just for clarification and potentially for procedural. You know, the committee is a recommendation to the board, that's what we do. And I agree, we need to look at the ordinance and try to develop a draft. However, do we get the full board buy-in by saying, maybe submit a letter right now to the full board saying there's a need, there's a requirement, we recommend that the county look in and to changing or updating an ordinance specifically to cure these issues. And then the board can give direction, the full board gives the direction to say, you need to do that, rather than just starting committees and going down the whole
I would say we take an agenda item to the board with this committee's recommendation, which may actually, you may want to take action on that today, a resolution, and then
Well, we can, or we can just
provide direction to staff.
That'll get us started.
Well, we could.
Well, you can
or we
provide
just-
direction
do it
to
either
staff
way.
via a board agenda item,
I mean,
is
what
how
thing-
we've done it before.
We can get on an agenda within, you know, a couple of weeks if they just have if we just have a letter to say, hey, we're gonna direct RMA to bring a draft.
No, we're gonna direct animal control.
I'm sorry.
to-
The ag commissioner.
Whoever's not here.
Yeah.
You know, what Michael does carry weight, has offered up, does carry some weight. In fact, it would prevent us from having another whole cycle on here, coming back to Ag Advisory for consideration and such as that, so.
I think it'd be nice to have that letter with, to the full board, and then have it just put on the agenda for consideration and or.
Tricia, I'll entertain a motion. You want to put it together?
Sure. I recommend that the County Ag Advisory Committee provide a letter to the Board of Supervisors to take up the matter of reviewing and potentially amending the rooster ordinance in Tulare County.
We put that on it, recommend that the RMA brings us an agenda item rather than just submitting a letter.
I don't think it should be rooster.
So I heard different advice from Denise and then different advice over here that they were gonna bring it up.
So we're working on the motion. What were your comment?
I was just saying that the RMA bring an agenda item forward based on this letter and this recommendation.
That'd be easier.
So I move that the Ag Advisory Committee make a recommendation to have RMA bring forth an agenda item to the Tulare County Board of Supervisors to discuss, analyze, and review possible changes to its rooster ordinance.
Can we say poultry?
Poultry ordinance.
Just so moved, Tricia, that's.
I was gonna say so moved after Michael last spoke.
I'll entertain a
As
second.
evidenced by a letter from.
Someone second that, please.
As evidenced by a letter.
I'll entertain a
from-
second. Been moved and seconded by Trish and Derek. So we'll have a letter as outlined by Trish.
I would hate this, but I just say that we'll, because we don't want to wait another meeting. The letter, we'll draft a letter that you, the chair, will approve.
Yes.
And so you're authorizing the chair to approve that letter.
That's what she said, I heard her say.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
All
That was in
in
the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all.
Townsend.
Appreciate the input, discussion, and the letter.
And maybe we'll do something about your cock-a-doodle-doo. And if you're living next door to something like that, it's not funny at all. Okay, Rocky Hill. At the agenda meeting, we talked about what should we do with Rocky Hill in our discussions. I asked that it be put on for a final discussion and or possible action. In other words, we have dragged this thing up the hill and down the hill. We have come up with little or no solutions. But I'm about ready to take it off the agenda.
We're talking Rocky Hill extension, we're talking Rocky Hill itself.
I thought we were supposed to have some county homework done on what the right to farm. There was supposed to be some meeting between like ag commissioner and I thought there was some other conversation that was gonna happen offline about right to farm.
Well, we talked about right to farm last time, and right to farm was about farming being a nuisance, not people being a nuisance to farming, which is the Rocky Hill issue is the people are
Right,
being
being a
the
nuisance to the farmers.
And that's not the right to farm. The right to farm is the other way around. That the farming
I
operation.
know what the right to farm is,
Yeah.
but I think we were using it to say, was there any way of expanding?
I thought
what
where
right
we
to
landed
farm
last
does.
time was temporary no parking during spray periods, and then the rest was a trespass
They
issue.
don't abide by it because Zach puts out stuff already and
Right.
with no parking and they just park around.
The sheriff's department doesn't enforce it?
Well, no, it's not because it's not unenforceable because Zach's putting it out. They're going around it. We talked about.
But we can do temporary no parking.
Well, we talked about no parking, and Fred Gill's concern is that they will then park on the other side and start blocking his headquarters, which he says he absolutely cannot have that because of the trucks. So we're kind of in a quandary between both sides. Zach was able to, and unless it's changed, he's adjusted his work schedule, which is very inconvenient for him to try to minimize what's going on there, but there's still issues. But they were talking about if we just put no parking signs, then we were gonna force them on the east side, and that was gonna really negatively impact the guild operation. So Reed was gonna find out, he's the one that gave me that update, and Reed was checking into, and maybe temporary, I don't know, but they'll have to be set up by ordinance, and I'm not sure how the ordinance is gonna be written, and who's gonna put them up and take them down, and.
Well, I thought we were talking about how we, put out the temporary no parking, like, when do we use it? Like when we close the road for events or, to do, road work, we'll put out the temporary no parking signs between this date and that date. And I would think that if RMA put out the no parking signs, that it would be enforceable.
But they'll still park across the street.
Well, I mean, it's still
both
gonna
sides.
push them somewhere else for that temporary, it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be an always no parking, it would be the temporary for when he needed to, because I thought the issue was he needed to get into those orchards to do work certain.
Well, you can't spray, because
Yeah.
it's blocking everything, and then it's been going on
For
far
years.
too long,
Yeah.
far too long.
Yeah.
So, we talked about, that's all been kicked around, Reed was having conversations, I haven't heard, that's the last I heard, so maybe we need to bring that back up, and maybe just Mike, maybe you, me, Reed sit down and talk to figure out if we talk to the Gills, if we talk to Zach, figure out what's going on.
I wasn't at the last meeting here, so I'm not privy. I didn't listen to the audio of the minutes.
I can't believe it, it's like you've been dealing with flood debris or
Let's
something.
do this, no, I'm not gonna remember, let's do this, let's leave it on the agenda this one next time, we'll schedule something, we'll sit down, we'll talk to Reed. I know Reed was working with Fred, and the flooding, obviously, this has been on long before that, but he says he's getting freed up now a little bit. Let's schedule a meeting and sit down and see what reasonably we can do.
I'll entertain a motion to table this item until the next meeting for a report.
So moved.
Michael and Supervisor McCarty. Second, move second, thank you. Motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
And
So,
just for the
Rocky Hill
record,
will stay on the agenda.
first is committee member Blattler, and second is committee member Spear
For the recording.
for the recording. Thank you.
Oh, I love that recording. I miss my transcriptions. Okay. Our next item is very interesting item. Department of Pesticide Regulation release of Oxitex OX 5034 Aedes aegypti mosquitoes. Discussion, possible action. To give you just a little bit of background, I got an email from Tricia, Ms. Blattler, that she had a visitor from an organization I'll let her tell you about in a few minutes, and on this topic. Essentially, the bottom line on it, well, the Department of Pesticide Regulation, under an EPA approval, has scheduled a pilot project in Tulare County to include the city of Visalia and one other location. I think it's a total of like 8,500 acres in the 3 counties, to release a genetically engineered mosquito, the Aegypti, to help control mosquito populations. When you read the EPA evaluation, it's pretty interesting. I'm not sure if I've got enough genetics to understand it. However, the idea is that these mosquitoes, male mosquitoes, have had a gene splice that makes that when they mate with a female, the offspring becomes sensitive to an antibiotic. Sorry? Tetracycline.
Yeah.
So as long as this male mosquito mates, and male mosquitoes don't bite, just the females, they die, those offspring die in the larval stage. This project has been going on in Florida for a couple of years now. It's been going on in Brazil a little longer. I think there's certainly proponents and there's advocates and there's people that are against it. Anytime you use the word genetically engineered, there's a lot of red flags go up. Probably now after COVID situation. But anyway, with that, I'm going to ask Doreen. Doreen, then give us a quick overview.
I do.
I'm sorry?
I'm giving that overview.
Oh, you're giving the overview. You have it.
Thank you. So as Jim summarized, I was approached by the group who you have a plethora of background on. I sent that to Jim and Michael for their agenda meeting. I didn't expect that you would get it all in the board packet, but you have it, advisory committee packet. So this group, which has offices in Washington, D.C. and Berkeley, called Friends of the Earth, approached Farm Bureau 6 or 8 weeks ago for this information. And Farm Bureau has formed no opinion, good or bad, of this information. I did originally bring this to Water Commission's attention. I didn't know to what degree the Vector Control District here interacted with any county agency related to water management or agriculture. Water Commission chose not to pursue hearing a presentation. So I did send it to Jim for consideration of this group. I just have 4 short slides. They are not Farm Bureau slides. They are slides provided by Friends of the Earth, okay? But it will just go to the next slide. Just a little bit of background on.
Slide.
So a British biotech company called Oxitec is who has applied to the Department of Pesticide Regulation to permit the release of up to 2 billion genetically engineered mosquitoes in Visalia. In 2022, the US EPA approved an experimental use permit which would have allowed this release. Now, just May 11th, Oxitec withdrew its permit application to DPR. So this is actually now going to probably be on hold, but it is maybe an opportunity for us to determine if there's any reason that County Ag Advisory or county in general would have any further interest in exploring or studying this. Oxitec has stated that it will reapply to the US EPA permit, and if approved, then also reapply for a research authorization permit from DPR. Now, I know that Denise sent Tom and I an early press release or some statement on this quite a while ago. And I think we both just summarily said, yeah, probably okay. I mean, I honestly couldn't even find notes in my inbox, but I know I had a conversation with someone about this. So this Oxitec mosquito is genetically engineered, as Jim mentioned. The Oxitec has genetically engineered the yellow fever mosquito, the Aedes aegypti, so that the female larvae may die. In theory, this would reduce the population of the the Aedes aegypti, a mosquito species that carries viruses like yellow fever, dengue, some other disease, Chikungunya, and Zika, which none of these are endemic in California. The Friends of the Earth will say that there has been no data showing success, and scientists have raised important concerns about the efficacy and risks associated with the open air experiment. And in terms of mosquito abatement, limiting the spread of mosquito-borne disease, while important, there may also be other safe and effective options, like another mosquito released in Fresno called the Wolbachia mosquito. No clue what that is. But next slide. So the GE females may survive in the environment. According to a study by Yale, Oxitec's release in Brazil showed that biting and reproducing female genetically engineered mosquitoes survived and then hybridized with the wild mosquito populations. Risk being that females have been engineered to need the antibiotic tetracycline to survive, which may commonly be found in citrus orchards and dairy farms. There may be an abundance of tetracycline in Tulare County, which could increase the risk that the GE female mosquitoes would survive. So that could create a risk to our environment that we are unprepared to deal with. There may be a greater risk of spreading disease. The Yale study suggests that the hybrid GE type mosquitoes then may be more aggressive, more virulent, more resistant to insecticide, and could necessitate and add to our spraying in the community. And public health risks, neither Oxitec nor EPA has released any company data on potentially increased allergenicity, which could impact people and animals bitten by these rogue GE female survivor mosquitoes. Last slide.
Do they have data to support that position? That they could become actually basically more dangerous, more aggressive?
From Yale.
Okay, that's a Yale study.
They're quoting a Yale study which had a hyperlink, and you probably got it in all this packet.
Yeah, there is.
Okay. So there are recommendations by the National Academy of Sciences for genetically engineered mosquitoes. The National Academy of Sciences suggests that ahead of a release, there should be regulations and risk assessments specific to those GE insects, particularly related to chemical pesticides. And it has been suggested that CEQA review this strategy for a standard process for risk assessment, public engagement, and effective alternative methods of abatement. And they also believe that it is a responsibility of our local community leadership to consider key public health information that may not be disclosed by Oxitec. It seems like an opportune time for community leaders to engage and review more information on this, since they have now withdrawn their DPR application and are holding back. Now, supposedly, the fellow that runs our Delta Vector Control District has worked with some of these GE bugs in Texas, and they believe that there is speculation on why he is bringing Oxitec to work here with him. That's not my opinion, that's Friends of the Earth's opinion. But they have, of course, asked, to try and get this in front of county leadership. I said I would bring it to Ag Advisory. I've done my piece. So, yeah. And I do have copies of these slides if you want them.
I go all the way back. I can remember the screwworm eradication program in Texas that saved the sheep and cattle industry in South Texas and all the way to Mexico, but that was back many years ago, back in the early 50s, 40s, or 40s and 50s. But back then, the idea of radiating flies and causing Frankensteins didn't seem to be as much of an issue as putting the GE label on something today. But modifying insects as a biological control has been done for quite some time. It's hard to sort out. My biggest concern with it was I felt like I never had a chance to understand it's going to be done in my backyard. All this was done at the federal level. The Federal Register is all EPA, and then the California DPR they added on to the federal permit with 3-day window for public comment and no notification. And all of a sudden we wake up and, you know, they're gonna do the project. To me, personally, that's disturbing more to me than the actual thinking about GE mosquitoes. Derek?
I'd just like to maybe suggest that that the chair puts us back on the agenda, if and when they do reapply and do go after their permits again. And then we can, you know, give it more time at that time. The way we talked about now, half of us won't remember, at least I won't. So, let's study it once when we need to study it and get too deep into it, maybe at this stage.
So what mosquito was gonna be released, what, a year or 2 years ago? They were gonna do it, because we got a bunch of emails from people from LA, don't do it, but it was gonna be local, and I think it was Delta Vector was gonna release.
Was it the Wolbachia, this one that was in Fresno?
The Fresno, it's gotta be that Fresno one.
I don't know I don't know if that was it, but then they stopped it, and they said because it was stopped, it was gonna have to go next season, but I'm getting, matter of fact, on the way here, I was talking to Tom, I'm getting killed on mosquitoes, complaints and they're not vector districts, but we've got these, you know, these recharge ponds now, all this rain, and they're just killing them. Interesting, the guy today, he says, well, they're not biting me, so Tom's gonna go out and travel and just see what we're dealing with for sure. But, you know, I mean, I can remember my thing, that we had these insects and stuff coming up, and they were releasing stuff. Wasn't the medfly one of them that they stopped it?
And that one was controversial.
It was controversial.
Oh, yeah.
I think the fear is they think these are gonna be biting mosquitoes that they're releasing and genetically modified to bite us.
I think too, there's an underscore, when you read Friends of the Earth, I think there's a anti-pesticide agenda underlying their concern, but they are trying to embed this conversation with Farm Bureau to say, but there's a risk to the dairy community, there's a risk to your livestock, there's a risk to human health we don't know about. So yeah, I'm not confident yet we know enough to form any kind of opinion. I'm also not very familiar with our vector district control system, or Delta vector district. I'd like more information as an ag advisory committee on what they do and what they cover and what they don't cover.
He's very open. When I first got in office, I never met with him. I mean, they're raising fish to give, mosquito fish to give away. They're trapping. They've got all kinds of stuff. We need to just to show up for a tour. He'll take you through the whole facility, and I mean, they really do a lot. But I'm getting beat up. And what's funny is, he said, well, you can do the vector district, and we send them out there, and they go, what do you mean I gotta pay? No, and they turn them away. Well, we all gotta pay. I'm in a district.
Well, I've got, in my part of my city, I've got the Gypsy Eye, and they will make your evenings and mornings miserable. Now, if you put a pair of boots on, a pair of pants, they're not so bad, because they're ankle biters. But,
well, we got hit with, and I don't know, these were black. They didn't look like the regular mosquitoes, and they hit my daughter and I in this huge black cloud swarm. And I mean, they didn't just swarm us, they just immediately came and just were all over us biting. And we had to go in the house and go, this was a huge cloud. They came out and checked, we have no standing water, we don't have anything. But it was worse than being out in Outlaw. When I worked out there, and we had to stand with the bug spray, keep spraying around, so they kept coming around. But this was worse than that. So they're coming around, but I'm getting a plethora of complaints.
Scott?
Trish, did you ferret out what the tetracycline did in this cycle? Does it make them more resistant?
It keeps the female from dying, right? So then the female can reproduce with other bugs and create what they believe to be more.
So if she survives the trial.
Right.
And bites a cow that has tetracycline.
It's gonna make her a more virulent bug.
That's kind of what I gathered, but it wasn't clear to me.
I don't think that's very scientific, what they try to say with the tetracycline.
Yeah, I could.
These are the same people that are against corn. That's, all our corn here is Roundup resistant, right? It's the same thing.
For citrus and pears and apples, only thing I can think of was BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, and I don't know if that interaction is close enough to tetracycline that would be an activator or not, but anyway, well,
Jim?
I'm not sure if it's got a good ag nexus.
One question I had, when you look at mosquitoes, and you look at Tulare County or Fresno County or the whole San Joaquin Valley this year, I mean, would they even make a dent?
I think they were only gonna be released on a pilot level in the city of Visalia.
Well, what I'm getting at is, and it goes back to your vector control. Vector control can get out there and they can spray and they can kill a hatch, one hatch. But that hatch is dead and there's gonna be another hatch blow in on the wind. I mean, they come from the mountains, they come from everywhere.
And that may be why they delayed it. You know, this year may be so
And
wet.
like I said, we may not want to legitimize their concerns. They may be a very radical anti-pesticide agenda organization. My more important inquiry is does Ag Advisory want to learn more about what programs are available right now in the county for mosquito control? And I think we're gonna have a really bad mosquito year, so.
It's bad, and the more recharge bond we're getting, it's gonna be more mosquitoes, so.
And this doesn't fit in Ag's purview, then we can drop it. I just don't know where to direct this
Well,
conversation.
They're tying, my constituents are calling and complaining, they're tying it to farming, they're tying it to the recharge ponds, they're tying it to the GSA, and just the farmers doing it now, it's man-made, because now they put these ponds out. So they are trying to make
it Ag's issue.
They're trying to make it an ag issue.
You know, you don't want the public pressure. I mean, we need the recharge basins. And they need to be, they can be designed to be a little more unfavorable for raising mosquito populations. I'm not sure that's gone into the design process.
Why don't we schedule a tour at Delta Vector? They'd be more than happy to, the doctor there would be more than happy to have us come in and tours. And I'm telling you, their lab, everything they have, their mosquito fish that they're raising, and they got them at different spots. They're giving to people. That's impressive.
I think the biggest impact we could have on mosquito control, and gets back to years and years of Tulare County history, is just South County doesn't have a control district. And I don't know, I know it's gone multiple votes and stuff over time. I don't know, being that it's gonna be a bad year, strike when the iron's hot, trying to get a vote on it again. I mean, I don't know how you get that segment of the population of our county to, you know, assess their property or whatever, tax it to get it. But if we at least had it, there would be an option for them to call instead of calling up all of our departments.
Well, the doctor, I can't remember his name, but he said that he's tried to expand the district, and people just, they won't let it turn away. They haven't gone to a Prop 218 vote, because you've been testing the waters, and it's been no more than it's been yes. Today, there may be more people say yes, because they're getting eaten by mosquitoes, but what they're saying is if we wouldn't have them, the farmers wouldn't have these ponds. So, okay, I got told that on the way over here, so I've heard that more and more, so.
They were there before these ponds, right? I mean, it's not, anyway.
Not to this extent. Well,
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what Tom traps out there. Because he said that they're in your eyes and your mouth, they swarm you, but they don't bite. That's not a mosquito.
I know gnats are really bad, but it's not the gnats.
Okay, thank you. So we're gonna move on.
Tom, did you want to say something?
All I was gonna make a point of saying, Mr. Chairman, is that if it wasn't already brought out, the reason DPR is involved is because these are considered a method or a biological pest control. And so therefore it goes through DPR, which they are a function of, or a department of EPA, Cal EPA. And with my experience, and probably everybody else here probably realizes, they don't release anything, any chemical that isn't well vetted before they would take the chance of even letting a research authorization happen. Now, this research authorization is just part of the process, but to me personally, just reading what I know about that, I wouldn't be worried about it in the least. And we do need other avenues to control mosquitoes. So, just my 2 cents.
And if it's effective, it reduces, hopefully it reduces, we know what the risk is of pesticide applications. Any other discussion on that topic? If it becomes important again, let me know. We can always put it back on an agenda. Dead livestock ordinance. Where are we on that? And I'm missing my written minutes.
I think where we last ended on that was to take another, and this, I don't know if this would be RMA or if this would be animal control, but I think I apologize for not being available for the last agenda review meeting, otherwise I could have updated you then, but bringing something to the Board of Supervisors to get direction, because really the only option left, absent private enterprise filling this space, would be for the county to somehow get into the business of large livestock disposal. So we would need to take, similar to the poultry ordinance, we would need to take something to the board to get direction on that, because I don't think we've really found a viable avenue forward, and there doesn't appear to be a private enterprise that wants to come in. I think Baker is still doing okay, but they're not taking horses, correct?
Correct.
And so,
And
animal control has found somebody to
Yes.
take horses.
Yes, there is a dead horse hauler that Cassie's using. Ron had a dead horse dumped not long ago, and animal control got out there and was able to pay to have it hauled away. But Yost brought it up last, and then there was some dialogue about, should we resurrect the ad hoc committee about that disposal, but we said, no pun intended, we beat that horse to death. And we kind of left it as, you were looking for more of a alternative for disposal of your dead
When we get a
cows.
100-degree weather, there will be times that Baker cannot pick up.
Right, your
Or
mortality.
to leave animals that are too far gone, right? You just leave them, and that's a bad thing, right? You just leave it at the dairy or
Right.
What can we do with these animals?
So.
You know what's gonna get done, people dig a hole, but that's not really what you want.
Right.
So if there's some guidance for the farmers, what can we do when Baker doesn't go to pick up my animals next month?
And the dairy commercial level situation is one piece of this conversation, but the issue we were trying to address in the subcommittee had been, the ongoing year-round chronic dumping of sheep and goats and drop calves and people's 30-year-old ponies that they don't want to dispose of properly or can't get disposed of properly because of what tallow and rendering doesn't take. So we have kind of this ongoing year-round problem with dumping, and then we have the problem of how do commercial livestock producers deal with those emergencies and heat situations. And we know there are some abatement strategies when a declaration of heat emergency is declared, but when those emergencies are not in place, what does Yost do with a bunch of mortalities? And that has been the stalemate we have now reached at this committee for years on this topic.
And then if it's something at that scale, then you have to have a declared emergency for the landfill to take them, or to compost them, or to bury them.
And I actually thought where we left the subcommittee off was with recommendations. I had written a 2-page summary white page on it. All the people we interviewed and talked to, from cooperative extension to veterinarians to dairy, we had put a set of kind of recommendations together, and one of those was to try and get solid waste to apply to make one of our landfills a class 1 permit or upscale their permit.
It could only be Visalia, I think.
Right, it was the Visalia landfill to be a year-round solution for the problem of the chronic dumping.
Well, but as you recall, solid waste presentation, this was out at the ag building conference room
4 to 6 months ago,
maybe a year ago. But they're under organics recycling requirements.
SB
which they're-
1383.
Yeah, they're not gonna be allowed to have any organics landfilled within, 2030 is that the cutoff date?
Yeah, something like that.
So
Well-
that is a very short-term option as
One
well.
thing that I brought
I
up.
don't remember animals being.
One at a time, you've already spoke. Keith, hold it, Keith, hold it. Ron?
No,
Go ahead, all right, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I don't recall animals being part of the
They would
1383.
release a lot of green.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of organics though. I
Yeah,
think.
that would be, yeah, I don't know what was included in that, but that's how they were interpreting it when they did the presentation.
Yeah, so, I know they don't want to, and their permits won't allow them, they would have to redo CEQA and everything to be able to do that. But it's just been this ongoing thing. Some counties, like Kettleman will take them, other landfills will, but ours aren't allowed. And I know right now, just because of 1383, they're up against it in tonnage, because they're going out, I think, a couple thousand tons to a new organic facility they're gonna build. So, I don't know, not knowing the amount of tons that we bring in, I think they're already getting like 16.
So Keith, I appreciate all the statistics, but do you have an answer?
No.
Okay, thank you.
This is a discussion.
We've got very good, I appreciate the recommendations here. Supervisor McCarry.
One thing that I just talked to Jason about, I did talk to solid waste, he hasn't got back to me, is using the animal control side. It's not gonna do the dairies and stuff, but in the dumps, is building a larger crematorium.
Correct.
And using it at the dump site, so we can use the methane gas as the fuel source. And then try to do the nexus, because we do have a crematorium for animal control, and then doing that. And so they haven't got back to me, but we're still trying to do that. And that's just gonna be the dumps on the side of the road. And they haven't got back to me. I got it on my notes, and I'll follow up on that.
And that was in.
You can follow up on that?
Yeah, that was in those white paper recommendations, was
Yes,
getting
and I
the
was-
county a larger crematorium.
Would there be a larger animal size on that? Like, because I know there was some, the one right now, like, they could take up to goat or sheep, but they couldn't take sheep or whatever, but that was about the largest.
We're gonna
size.
build it, take a cow, whatever.
Yeah,
Something
the
like
one
that.
at
That's
Crown.
the intent. I don't know if we can get permitted for it, but that's the intent.
So that's for the methane generator out at the dump?
Yeah, they're generating methane, we gotta burn it off already,
Burn it
right?
off,
If we can capture some of that, use that as a fuel source.
Yeah.
And then have a large
So
crematorium out there.
can we put that on a top, we put you on the next agenda?
I've already asked, I'll follow up, yeah, if you want, and I'll see what I can find out, and I wrote.
I would like,
Through the chair,
I
that
know-
would be a great topic for a support letter at some point when the time comes.
well, yeah, when we hear it. Yeah. Trish?
I just have a request of staff that as we're re-agendizing some of these topics that have like been a can kicked down the road for 5 miles, I think like the next agenda needs to have like a county employee assigned to give us an update on what has happened with the topic from point A to point B. Because when we just put these items on this agenda, and now we have recorded minutes that none of us listened to since the last meeting, we're all sitting here doing a tap dance around a lot of regurgitated
Yep.
topics.
You're absolutely right.
And so, I mean, if we're gonna have Supervisor McCarty follow up on, this specific crematorium topic, then that needs to be assigned to Supervisor McCarty to bring back more details. Or Denise, or Doreen, or Jim, or Farm Bureau, or whoever. But this is just way too vague and way too hard to make any movement on any of these subjects, especially now with recorded minutes. Saying.
Supervisor McCarry, who were you talking to on that?
Well, I talked to Luke about it, Luke's about from solid waste, and I talked to our CAO, so
Okay.
I'll follow up with Jason, probably Monday, because I'm heading out of town tomorrow, but I'll follow up
Okay.
and then make sure that we get it.
The other item I'd like for staff to look at, and we brought it up 2 or 3 times, and it's also in the white paper, is other parts of California, and I'm not gonna try to beat the composting, that's way too logical to be able to consider. But the other parts of California have been able to establish a procedure for on-farm burial.
That's right.
Now, what we need to do is ask the Regional Water Quality Board in this area, in Tulare County, what we would have to do to be able to have on-farm burial. Not just carte blanche, you can't do it. But, okay, so if the water table's 80 feet, Can I do on-farm burial? If the water table's 120 feet, can I do on-farm burial? Can you do that for us?
And would that be with the condition like renderers can't take it, it's like,
Well, that's
can't
happened.
haul it or something,
Yeah.
or would it be anytime?
That's where we have to find out what the limits are on it.
Because for emergency purposes, I don't know if it was through Cal OES or.
But
through
the
regional board.
thing is that emergency purpose is a bunch of bullshit. Because whose emergency is it? It's not the supervisor, when Ron has something sitting on his farm deteriorating,
It's an emergency.
it's an emergency, okay? Just because it's not a
Countywide declared
countywide emergency doesn't mean it's not an emergency. So that becomes a bureaucratic white flag, I throw it out as an emergency, okay? We have to have, now, we don't want to put the renderers out of business. That's the best way to dispose of any of our dead livestock, but that's a commercial operation. But we need to have an easy way for the guy that's a plum grower that has a horse show up on his property that doesn't make him an outlaw when he wants to bury it. Or somebody has a horse die, they don't have to pay $1,500 for a horse. A $30 horse dies, you gotta pay $1,500 to haul it up to get it destroyed,
Yeah.
incinerated.
A dead hauler.
It just doesn't make sense. If you're above 600 feet, we know what happens. But it shouldn't be like the IRS or golf. It should make everybody a cheater.
Well said.
On the record.
Larry, if they did get a crematorium big enough, to take those animals, could they have that out there legally, or do you get into a problem there?
Well, that's the problem, and that's what the delay was, because 1383 was they were pushing it real hard, and they were saying, oh, no animals, and they just were focusing on it. So we're trying to get those answers. And I haven't followed up with Lucas, to be honest with you. I just talked to Jason about it the other day, said, hey, we gotta get this back going again, because, of course, now it's getting warm, so now I'm thinking about it, right? Should have thought about it when it was cold.
Would one solution be, and I don't know how that 13 whatever works, but could you get a portion of the dump out there? In other words, okay, we need for a crematorium, we need an acre. Get that acre designated for whatever we need to designate it, and then the rest of the dump is a dump. Is that something, I don't know the law, I don't.
My understanding is no, because what they're doing is their intentions is to stop all methane gas production, and they claim that these dumps are creating methane gas with organics. So you can't even take a portion of it, but the problem is that they want to go out and compost it, which also creates methane gas, so their theories are flawed. So my understanding was that was a no, that's what we asked. So that's why we said, well, what about just a big crematorium? We're already permitted for a crematorium for animals. If we can do the nexus with animal control, can we do it? And I never got.
Just put the gas pipeline across the road and buy an acre right there.
No, we already have the gas pipeline coming from Cal Bio and all their projects.
Yeah.
Is there a law against them selling that methane gas?
They have a contract, not to get too far into the weeds, we have a contract, however, contemporary landfilling methods result in a very limited amount of methane gas. So the checks, when I worked in solid waste 12 years ago, the checks were like, I don't know, $1,000 a quarter or something. It just wasn't producing a lot.
But
And
it
then
would
it got
be
to the
enough
worst
for
and nobody
us.
was buying it. It would be enough for,
It'd be enough for us to capture in a tank and have it available.
so the question really is, can you permit a crematorium on a landfill site?
Right. And Lucas was gonna check, and I just haven't got back, and he 1383 that's what their big focus was at the time. So I'll have to follow up.
Well, if you bought, if you could contract with the county to buy what methane gas they put out of it and put the crematorium somewhere else or close to it, is that a possibility?
Depending on what the state says. I don't know. We have to check. We can ask anything.
Could you divorce the crematorium from the landfill itself to where they wouldn't look at it, Cal Recycle and what have you, would look at it that way, this would be a crematorium, and it's on the landfill
Then
property.
you got San Joaquin Valley Pollution Control.
There you go.
So, yeah, that's why we need to check. I don't know. I don't know the answers, but We do need a floor.
Just put a tanker trailer right there. Fill the tank.
There's plenty of natural gas. That line's on the other side of 328 right there, so I'm sure Cal Bio would be like, hey, sure, we'll sell you some of this. There's an old scrubber right there, and there you go.
I think we'll, good point. All right, so we'll have Supervisor McCary. I'm gonna push on Michael to see what we can do, find out a little bit more from the Regional Water Quality Board. There's been, maybe since the last time he told us no, there's been some changes perhaps.
No.
Yeah, in another language. What did I do with my agenda? Any other actions that you prefer on the dead livestock ordinance?
I just want to offer a comment since we have two supervisors in the room. One of the other conversations we had multiple times when I wrote that white paper was, this is the largest dairy county in America. So while we are likely to be told by every permitting authority, no, no, and no, can we do anything to think outside of that box with the fact that we have the UC Davis Veterinary Medicine Teaching and Research Center in our backyard, and we're the largest concentration of confined animal dairy facilities of probably anywhere in the country? Could we approach the water board and the air board with the possibility of some kind of pilot project? Because then we could be potentially a county that could set some precedent for other farm counties to follow. Maybe we put a crematorium at VMTRC.
They have one.
Maybe we buy them a bigger one. Maybe we, look at this as some kind of research project for Julie Finzel and Cooperative Extension to get their arms around helping calf ranches and the dairy community. And a byproduct of that is we figure out some of this other problem with, chronic roadside dumping. But I'm just asking our county's leadership to think, could we write a grant that would create a solution that's outside the box? I'm sure we could have Washam and England and others go ask all these questions, and they're all going to be told no, and we're all going to be right back here at the table having the same conversation. So as far
I
as
know UC Davis did a pilot back in like 2007 or 2008, and
They did another one recently too.
yeah, and they, as the UC, which is an arm of the state, couldn't get past the regional board on permitting and getting.
You'll find my name on that publication.
Yeah.
Yeah, I say Jim did a study 25 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's
composting and all the benefits, but okay, enough said. Enough said. You've heard me.
I still think the best thing to do, big recorder in the sky, you put them on a truck and you take to Sacramento. Then it becomes somebody else's emergency.
Well, the other avenue is I know of so many other states that use their digesters for these situations. They have abilities to coat the animals inside the digesters. You have so much going on inside of there to decompose the animal, yet we have all the restrictions in the state here, yet we have the most digesters in the United States.
Yeah.
We can't use them.
There you go.
Call me on that, what I do is I'll start with Shannon Grove.
Yeah. Like I said, we may have to look at some kind of pilot opportunity. I don't know.
Call me on that.
Yeah.
And we'll put some stuff together and then send it out, see what we can do, there's been some all understanding, stick up.
Okay, other business. Have you got an update for Sigma?
So our basins that received incomplete on their groundwater sustainability plan.
You want to stand up and.
We're gonna make you. Well, I don't have anything really to report except that they're reviewing their plans and revising their documents, and they're meeting with the state board to stay and DWR to stay out of probationary status, but we really won't know anything until later this summer. I think they have through July to provide all of that information back, and then we'll find out if they trigger probationary status. And as a reminder, probationary status means that the state board comes in and basically makes rules until the locals can satisfy the powers that be.
And so how many have actually made it through the state process?
Well, I'm not sure. I know
I
that
heard there's only one that got approved.
in our area, Kings Subbasin was approved, which is a little surprising. But I mean, I will say we have 2 subbasins that border each other that use the same consultant, and the border conditions don't align, so I can see where that might be a problem. They're trying to rectify all of that. I know none of the Tulare County PSPs were passed.
I was.
And Kern's in trouble. So it's kind of like, who are they gonna come after first, Kern or?
And there is a legislative proposal to hold off on the probation piece in lieu of more cooperation and time for these GSAs, is that correct?
There's a piece of legislation relative to the probationary status that adds some money into it, which before there wasn't, so it would assist the state board in helping the local come into compliance.
I kind of got this second or third hand, and so maybe you can help me put it aside as this rumor. But a rancher in the foothills that comes along the riparian area, kind of in your area, Mr. Townsend, was told by his GSA that they wanted to assess him a fee for the evapotranspiration of the oak trees and sycamores in that riparian area. Is that a true statement?
So I'm not sure. I know there's some dryland farmers that in the upper elevation at the top of the subbasin that are included under SGMA that have taken issue with the assessments and that sort of thing. And I do know that the GSAs are using evapotranspiration, but I don't think there's a crop type for riparian. Most of them have selected, I can't think of the name of the entity that supplied the data, but the parcels are assigned a crop type, and then they use evapotranspiration to determine how much it grew, and then they back into a formula as far as what the net water use is, with the assumption that whatever was delivered outside of rainwater and surface water then would be
I guess
it's not perfect, because like we have a wastewater treatment plant in Traver that they call it a vineyard, and it's like, well, that's not a vineyard, that's a wastewater treatment plant.
Well, I have some real concerns. If they're going to, this particular landowner, and I guarantee he will not just say something, he will do it. He said, if I want to be charged for the oak trees and the sycamores, I'll cut them down. So if we start, we're putting habitat at risk.
Yeah. What they were doing, okay, if you had rangeland up to 600 feet, you were paying $9.90 an acre for every acre you had, based on basically what you're talking about. It was a flat fee. They were paying the same thing that I pay on my orchards. They were paying the same thing. Then they came up with this, what do they call it? Water market, okay? And now, because you don't farm that land and it's taking in this water, you can sell your water off of that property that you don't farm, up to 600 feet. I know people that have made $500,000 on rangeland because they can sell that water that is supposedly under that ground, and they can supposedly sell it to somebody else. You know, to me, this is nuts. But, you know, I've got all kinds of ground above that, and every bit of rain that falls on it goes down below, but I don't get any credit. I mean, it's, to my way of thinking, ridiculous, the whole thing. But they concocted this deal, and so now they're going through with it. So, you know, I don't know what the end result is,
So have they told you that they link your trees, your oaks and your?
Above 600 feet, they haven't said anything to me, but there was such a die-off in the drought of oak trees and sycamores and all these things that they fall in love with. There was such a die-off in the drought. I mean, we probably lost, in some areas, we lost 100% of the oak trees. You know, in some areas, depending on the exposure, north-south exposure, you know, we lost 100% of some of the oak trees, you know, in flats and things. What's going to happen is you're going to see the green belt or the tree belt around here is going to go up, and the stuff that's down low, died off in the drought, it's eventually going to fall down, decay, be gone, and the green belt has moved up.
I'm on the East Cahuilla GSA board, which covers the foothills. Yes, the trees will give off an ET, but if it's not an irrigated land, they're not gonna be built on it. And if you are an irrigated land and you got a canal running through, and there's a bunch of weeds along of it, you're gonna show a much higher ET through your property because there's gonna be transpiration coming from the canal and from the weeds. But they're looking at that, identifying it, and they're deducting that back out. So if this guy's got that question or that, I'm not sure which GSA he's in, but if he's centrally, he's probably gonna be leased.
He's in ETGSA, which I sit on that board on behalf of the county, and his unique situation is he does have riparian, he has a river, streams running through that do have trees on them. Those they're supposed to take out of the satellite readings. Mm-hmm. They go back and physically take those out so he doesn't get charged on the evapotranspiration along that riparian corridor. However, he also has wells on the property, and so the fight right now, or his contention, which I agree with, is that he's got riparian rights to the underground water as well. However, Sigma kind of trampled all over that.
Right.
So that's the problem. It's not really a problem with the GSA, it's a problem with the state.
Irrigated lands, like where Ron's at, it's non-irrigated, you know, it's the country, those guys up there in the foothills are running.
We certainly don't want to see a situation though with the riparian areas, if there's any sycamores left after the floods.
So they're not, so the riparian areas are, at least in the GSA, and probably everyone that uses the same satellite imaging, they go back and physically take those riparian areas out.
They back out the numbers from the natural,
But to Larry's point, the weeds would show up outside of the riparian area. If it's still wetter, it's gonna grow weeds, it's gonna show. So really, until you've tilled everything under, it's still showing some kind of growth.
They've been working with the guys. I mean, there's some canals, as long as the canals or the rivers, you can't till weeds, so it's gonna show. So they've identified those spots. That's why East Cahuilla is taking so long to get the information out, and they've been backing it out. They've also found that different varieties of citrus provide a different ET. So they've had to back all that stuff out. So it's been a process to try to prove it, but these trees and the natural growth, they're backing those out.
Okay. That's good to hear. It kind of distressed me when I heard it.
But he needs to, if he has any questions, he needs to call his GSA and talk about it.
He does.
Your supervisor is on the GSA.
Apparently Dennis knows.
Yeah, I know.
He's probably got you a speed dial.
No, he's a friend, yeah. But yeah, he's got valid points, and GSA is trying to work, and it's an unfortunate situation where you're forced, our plan hasn't been accepted yet, like you were just talking about. Kings was accepted because they had you put a section in there about the GSA paying for damage to domestic wells. That's what this is all about. That's why they're not accepting it. Yeah, hello. And so they stuck it in there. There's no way they can pay for it, but it passed. So now they're gonna look for legislation to pay them. And that's the same thing we're fighting with the ETGSA. Because we've done everything the state wants. It's just, they want us to say, we'll pay for every single well that has ever gone dry in your area, and the farmers will pay for it through the GSA, and it's like, that's a non-starter. Yeah.
That was just gonna be my quick comment. I served on a water panel yesterday that the League of Women Voters had, and we had Erin Fukuda there on behalf of GSAs and myself on behalf of farmers, and then we had a community water center representative, and a retired city councilor who also sits on a GSA. And it was one of the first times, and while I'm very, very aware, hyper aware of how much our environmental justice and social justice advocacy is strongly winning in a lot of conversations in this state, the Community Water Center made it very clear that their entire intention of having Sigma pass was to have a heavier hammer to use in their toolbox to bring about, meaningful change, to bring more drinking water to our, affected communities, that right to water. It was the first time I'd really heard that publicly announced, but it's kind of chilling in the sense that, while we're over here trying to figure out how to keep farming and keep water and land in production, what the really underlying premise of Sigma is about for the environmental justice community is the right to clean drinking water, which is a very important objective, but it is certainly coming at a tremendous cost to landowners and our agricultural economy. So, interesting times.
All right. Anything else on Sigma? Thank you for that input. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
And also the committee appreciates it too.
It's terrible to depress everybody with one statement.
I know. Tom, you got anything on flood update?
No, as far as additional losses, there's gonna be some showing up. But, we received a lot of all of that, and the claims have just about come to a halt. Doesn't mean anything was answered, all of those dairies and farmers along the canals and the riverbanks that had breaches, as far as I know, none of them are gonna be able to get any assistance. They're gonna have to foot their bill themselves. They're just falling into a niche area that they just can't access.
So the ranchers have lost water gaps. They just don't count on a check.
Yeah, basically. So then beyond that, we all know the water's heading out to Tulare Lake and Kings County, so.
I will just add, we have a debris removal program. The contractor's probably gonna be around for another week or two.
Not even 2 weeks.
So if you can help spread the word, if anybody still has flood debris that they need picked up, they need to get it out to the right of way, and then we can send the contractor out. I sent a note out to our water agencies earlier this week because we can see debris piles on private property along channels. If those can get moved out to the county right of way, our contractor can get them.
I reached out to Trish to put the feelers out. We're discussing a possibility of some kind of aid to the farmers, but we're trying to see what it's gonna look like, number one, and number two, it won't be a lot, but what we're looking at is the guys that, in the groups that went out there and sat on the Tule River on their own dime, pulling logs out to keep it from blocking and flooding, the guys who went out on their own and brought in dirt and fixed breaches and stuff in the first days of this going, before we got our contractors lined up, and to make sure that, they did what they could to help protect the greater good, you know what I mean? It's not me putting a berm around my house and wanting full reimbursement. They were trying to stop to help do that. So we're trying to see what's out there. Everyone I've had 3 people respond to the emails you sent out. Most of them though were dairies that got hit really hard and looking for something because FEMA turned them down, but we're still trying to get an idea of what's out there. Most of the people that I spoke to, and they were working on Yocol Creek and Deer Creek and Tule, the local irrigation districts, even though it's not natural waterways, well, Tule's different, accepted the bills, and they were trying to file for it. So the farmers themselves weren't out. I don't know about Zach and Tantos and those guys. Well, I know they submitted it to Cowee Delta, but so we just want to make sure that they were out doing what they could to stop it and see if we can at least help. We just don't know what it looks like yet. We're still trying to figure out. I've only gotten 3 responses from the email, and those were 3 different dairymen that were really, they just got hit hard with the flood is kind of, so we don't know what we're gonna do yet. There's still more discussion coming on our side. We just can't promise, we definitely can't promise a lot of money, we can't promise anything. It'd be a small little bit, but something that may help. One guy was working on the river itself, and then it came out, and he lost his excavator,
He lost what?
His excavator. It just, the dam, the breach blew out and just buried that thing.
Really?
So, we're just trying to see what's out there.
Mr. Chair, I might just add to that what Supervisor McCarty's talking about, only we've talked about it. It hasn't come to the board yet, but we're gonna bring it to the board, and it will be relatively small because it's general fund money, and so it's not gonna be that much. However, on a positive note, I was back in Washington last week, and every single congressman that I met with is looking at some sort of a supplemental funding bill. Maybe attached to the farm bill, or maybe just some sort of appropriations attachment. And it would be specifically for things like this, things that fell through the crack, people that went out and fixed things. So we, yesterday, through our CAO, gave that to McCarthy's office, gave them a list of things that we'd like to see included, which includes all of this that we're talking about. So if that funding comes through, that'll be more significant than our county general fund funding, but it would come to the county as discretionary funds to then disseminate to folks that need it. And that another one, that was McCarthy's. I know Valadeo is looking at doing an attachment to the farm bill to do, and that would be very focused on ag and crop losses, things like that were not covered. So hopefully, if they can get some of this through, we can get a little bit more funds toward the end.
Okay. Keith?
Yeah, I have a question. I got a call from Kings County last week, or maybe the week before. I guess they were having a bird die-off in the Tulare Lake area, and they're asking if we've had anything like that happening on our side. And I was joking, I go, no, all our water goes your way, so we don't have to worry about it. But he was just, they don't know if it's from mosquitoes or, could it be something that's in the water, botulism, pesticides, whatever. So has there been any reports, that you guys are aware of?
So how many poultry operations did that water go through before it got down there?
Yeah. Is this wildlife birds?
All, it wasn't just like, crows, yeah, it was wildlife birds.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to add to what the supervisors were talking about on the flood update before we left that topic. Farm Bureau and our Ag Commissioner and Citrus Mutual had a couple flood relief meetings where we tried to bring, county leadership and tax assessor's office and FEMA and FSA, USDA and RCS folks, all the alphabet soup folks came out. And yeah, it was really disheartening that at the end of the day, unless a dairy producer had mortalities, there's basically nothing for dairies. One dairy operator has shared with Christopher Greer, who shared with me, who I did share with Mr. McCary, one bill, or kind of his first early estimate of cost for the evacuation. It was $620,000 for him to move dirt, move cattle, buy feed, and try to, keep those cows alive. And so I can only imagine if one dairy can produce one spreadsheet of costs at $600,000, and now we multiply that against every dairy that had to do some form of that kind of evacuation work and replace feed, and then we factor in all the guys that did all the heavy excavation work and donated diesel and time and equipment that ended up falling in the river and getting lost. I mean, there are so many uncaptured monies lost through this flood that will never come under FEMA, will never come under FSA, won't be, something the SBA can assist with. It's just saddening because when we see herd dispersals, which is happening right now, I mean, I'm seeing several of these dairies sell out. We're not going to regain that economic engine by letting them go out of business. So I don't know what the answer is. I really appreciate that our supervisors have been a very open ear to this conversation, but I mean, it's just getting harder and harder and harder to try and keep ag afloat when we have these kinds of, impacts and no likelihood of recovering any type of support for them. So I've heard the dairy industry talk about, some of the processor disruption, milk being dumped. When we had creameries shut down, that's a disruption to commerce here on a large scale. So I don't know where we go from this, but I hope our county is able to elevate that concern. We've certainly talked to the Congress people about it, and we've talked, to FEMA and other individuals. I wonder, is there any other money, like from COVID or ARA or Williamson Act or anything else that could be directed towards trying to help our communities recover? Because there's a lot of support for residential. There's not a lot of support for the farm community. It just isn't.
I was up at a friend's house in Springville, Upper Globe Drive, where the bridge, and there's debris piled up, but the right-of-way's gone. Quarter-mile is just gone, along with her fences and, the pasture and everything. It was interesting. The power of that water was just amazing. So it's kind of comical. Just put it along the right-of-way,
Her right-of-way's gone.
Right-of-way, and you can see chunks, big chunks of asphalt, just here and there.
Lastly, I did hear, I think it was today or yesterday, from Speaker McCarthy's office, someone related to it, and Kyle, they're wanting information from us and anybody, I suppose, about what all the different needs are out there with prevention. How can we prevent this in the future? What needs to be done? Dredging channels, whatever it might be. So we're getting them as much information as we can think of, and Tricia, if you can think of more, be sure to let us know. But so they're sounding hopeful that they're gonna be able to get some money. Again, some of it maybe leading to what Chairman Townsend mentioned, but it's all about the future. What things that they can do to prevent a lot of the things that happened here this past year, which not going to help all of these people that got hurt, but anyway, they are looking at it.
So it's a discussion we've had, and we're gonna play the governor's game and extend this emergency out as long as we can. That allows us to do some things that we normally couldn't do. We have an email from the Department of Fish and Game that says if an emergency is declared, do what you gotta do, and then to ask for forgiveness later, justify it. So the problem is that everything's running with water now. Everything's been flushed out. So we'll have to wait until things dry out, and then, maybe a year or two down the road, we will keep the emergency for several years, as long as, like the fire, because we're waiting for FEMA to come back, so the emergency will last for quite some time. And then we're gonna have a meeting, we're on the flood control district, and we're setting that up as to what can we do, what authority can we do. Spoke with the Workforce Investment Board, they will pay people, they have funding to walk these canals and clean out a lot of this garbage and trash and stuff like that to prevent it from clogging in, because that's what happened. Lack of maintenance, they got plugged up, they backed up, they rose up, we had breaches, and just a sheer volume. We can't fix the volume of water. I got 6 inches in about a 12-hour period next to it. Mountain's got much more than that, so there was a combination of things that plugged up. So we are working to see what we can do to continue this in the future and not be held up with red tape.
Because I'm old, and I was here in 1955, okay, we had the 55 flood. And you can't imagine what the 55 flood was like compared to this. This was nothing. Okay. But Larry, this is what happened after the 55 flood. All this money came in, and they cleaned channels, they channelized things, they cleaned all this stuff out, they put in barriers, they did all kind of stuff after the 55 flood, from about 55 to 60. But they never maintained it, and you saw it, you know just exactly what I'm talking about. All this stuff grew back, they didn't. I can tell you a story about Cahuilla Delta. They were out trying to get brush out of one of their rivers, and they got sued, and they had to stop. And the environmental organizations came in and stopped the brush removal, the trash removal on these waterways, and you see now the result of it.
That's why the
emergency condition.
Emergency condition says you do what you gotta do and ask for forgiveness later, pretty much. I mean, that's just paraphrase, but we're gonna do what we can to prevent that. I remember as a kid watching them drop a piece of equipment down on this stuff and pushing stuff out way back then.
Yeah.
We haven't done it, and
Yeah,
so.
of course, the overall question for me is this a once every 5 years, once every 10 years, once every 20? Is this a new, is this something new? Or is it gonna be another 100 years before we see it
No,
again?
I mean, in my law enforcement career, we've always identified, there's a White River, Deer Creek, Tooling, Sand, Yokol, and when it rained a lot, and we knew it was raining a lot in the mountains, it was raining here, we'd send cars out to go check and look at, physically look at it, because we've been breaching flood. Lewis Creek floods almost every time. White River used to flood quite a bit, and it kind of backed off when they fixed 99, but that goes, Sand Creek floods, Kings River floods. There's spots at Kings River, even though it's flowing and going now, it's so deep, it's not quite waist deep. It's just so much sand in there.
Yeah.
So my question is, we buy sand every year, when this emergency thing, why can't we get in there and dredge that out, pull it out, and then stack the sand for future flooding? We don't know. That's why we're gonna have this meeting and see what we can do.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, because every one of those is an uncontrolled waterway.
That's right.
Our trouble this year was from the uncontrolled waterway. It wasn't from the Cahuilla or the Tule. I mean, you got the dams up there, they control the water. You go up to look at the Cahuilla today and it's way down there, anticipating the water to come down. It's the uncontrolled waterways that they won't clean out and they won't take care of. And when we get a situation like this, here it comes.
But we had a lot of problems with Tule's, because Tule's considered a natural waterway, even though it's a conveyance from some of the irrigation districts.
Yeah.
So,
But
I can't promise that
look
we're
what
still
they're
looking.
gonna do. Look what how overgrown that damn thing was.
So we're looking. I don't know what we can do, we're looking.
Well, it's wet enough, it's gonna grow back fast. All right, thank you very much. Committee member updates. Put this at the end to keep them fast.
And this is gonna be so short because it's so late. So instead of giving you an actual update, I'm just gonna recommend go to valair.org, look up what ARB is coming up with requiring EV, big rigs at a cost of about $800,000 per rig. That's coming. And then take a minute and zip over to the CAC minutes, and you can look up the information on what's going on with the end of ag burning and things like that. So the information's there, it's important, it's applicable to what we talk about, and we can put it on a future agenda if people look up if they're interested.
Mr. Chair, I did have something when you brought up ag burning. I'm aware of two growers, totally opposite ends of the county. One was in my district, one was in another district, that somebody set they're pushed out an orchard and they had several stacks. Someone alongside the road caught set one on fire. They called fire to come put it out. Elder Pollution Control sent them a bill for $20,000, and it was an arson fire.
Airborne gun for $20,000.
And then Amy Shucklingan said she got a call of somebody in town here, somewhere around here, that their house, their building or something had caught on fire. It wasn't, it was an accidental thing, and Air Pollution Control sent them a bill. So we need to kind of keep our ears out. If this is happening to, I mean, I ordered 3 in the last year. Chief Norman sent a letter off to respond to them, sent them the report, said it was listed as arson on the 2 ag burns, and they haven't responded back. So these people are sitting in limbo, so they're not going to pay anything until push comes to shove. But those 2 incidents were documented as arson fires. These guys didn't just, it wasn't like all of them were burning and then, oh, by the way, I got caught, so it's an arson.
And if you have not read up on AB 617, please do. It's gonna be a command and control compliance arm, basically. It's gonna be the air police. And they're gonna be looking at the air in your homes. It's gonna be a mess. study up on it, we can always have something about it later on.
AB 617.
AB 617.
Comments? Committee members? Trish?
So at your next agenda setting meeting, will you be trying to kind of double check all the things that county employees said they were gonna follow up on between now and the next meeting?
No.
I just want our meetings to be more effective.
So we're on
I understand, I'm gonna try.
Thank you.
And so will Michael.
Thank you. I actually thought we were gonna like solve the rooster problem today, because I thought Dennis is coming, we've had the ordinance, it's been on the agenda 3 times already, we're gonna knock this out today. And now all we've done is set another meeting for the county to talk.
At least we're gonna get on the agenda though.
Just saying, just saying.
Tom? Anybody else?
Number 9.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Item number 9 first.
Okay, request for future agenda items.
Just one thing I'd like to know more about, when it's appropriate. I'm getting a lot of feedback from people now on this whole mRNA vaccine deal for our food supply, food chain, our beef and sheep and chickens and everything else. I'd like to know more about that. Apparently that's going to be kicking in after July of this year. And it's a real concern to a lot of people. You've got a half the country that don't care because they got the shot, but half the country didn't, and they're kind of worried that this is a way of getting this type of technology into their body. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'd just like to know from the cattle people, the sheep people, whatever, are these going to be used in the livestock that they produce here, or going to be in the dairy cows? Not just regular vaccines, we're talking the mRNA. So I'd like to know more about that at some point, have that be talked about.
Just point of information, I know we've kind of broadened our agenda back, I appreciate that, but don't we want to kind of discuss topics that we think are in the purview of county jurisdiction? I don't know, I'm not sure what you're talking about.
If they're doing something in the food supply.
Who's they?
If the FDA is promoting certain types of vaccines for livestock that not everybody understands whether they're, and they might even be harmful, shouldn't we want to have a position on that?
We as Tulare County Ag Advisory?
Absolutely, that we're talking cattle. I mean, who else would you talk to?
Through the cattle, yeah.
Yeah, who else would you talk to?
That's what they're testing on right now.
Cattlemen's
I wouldn't go to
Council,
Sigma.
the Cattlemen's Council, California Cattlemen's Association.
Well, that's exactly, we got cattle guys here, they could bring us information on it.
Actually, some of the studies is through couch numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think this is interesting, you know, our county supervisors could say, not in this county.
Stand corrected.
I'll, send me a link to it.
Okay. And any of the cattle guys?
And I'll take a look, I'll talk.
They get the
to my manager.
information sent directly to them from FDA and from their regulatory agencies.
Anything else? Future agendas will, you can also, we meet at least a week before, so if you want to send me a reminder, I'll follow up. And Elva is our new staff member, and she's probably just wondering what she got into.
Not usually this long, don't worry.
And it's not usually this warm.
I say,
No,
please
it's
have
usually
air
cold.
conditioning.
Yes, ma'am.
So.
Is there a fan behind Michael
Got a
all this
motion,
time?
second to adjourn?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Second. Meeting's
Think of this to mine.
I'm dying over here.
You can turn these big lights on.
Hey, Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, Jim, who motioned to close? Who motioned to close?
Derek? And Scott Spear.
Derek.